It only took one sentence to light the match. When Rex Ryan went on national television and said, "Something's missing with this kid," he wasn't just offering analysis. He questioned the character of Shedeur Sanders, not his footwork, not his reads, his work ethic. And that's where the line got blurry. Ryan didn't stop at critique. He accused Shedeur of sitting in the back of meeting rooms, not studying, running his mouth like he'd already earned QB1 status. That's heavy language. In the NFL, once the word lazy even floats around, it sticks, fair or not. But here's the real tension. Where was the proof? There were no leaked reports, no coaches backing the claim, no insider confirmations. Just a bold statement dropped into the media cycle like fact. And in today's league, narrative spread faster than truth. That's when Cam Newton stepped in. Cam didn't treat it like a casual hot take. He recognized it immediately for what it was, a character narrative forming in real time. On the 4th and 1 podcast with Nick Wright, Cam challenged the comment directly. If you're going to question a young quarterback's preparation on national TV, you better have receipts. Because this isn't just about football. It's about perception. Shedeur is a third-string quarterback with starter-level attention. He's leading jersey conversations, dominating headlines, and pulling spotlight without taking meaningful snaps. That kind of presence makes people uncomfortable. A fifth-round pick isn't supposed to command that type of gravity. And maybe that's the deeper issue. Confidence gets praised until it shows up in a package certain critics don't expect. Aura becomes arrogance depending on who's watching. And suddenly, a young quarterback's composure becomes a debate topic instead of his performance. So now the real question is whether Shedeur talks too confidently. It's whether the league and the media are ready for a player who refuses to shrink just because he's not starting yet. The moment that set everything off wasn't subtle, it was blunt. When Rex Ryan went on ESPN's Get Up, he didn't frame his thoughts as mild concern or constructive criticism. He said, "Something's missing with this kid." Then he doubled down. He claimed Shedeur Sanders runs his mouth like he's already a starting quarterback. He suggested he should get your ass in the front row and study. That's not breaking down mechanics. That's questioning preparation. And in the NFL, attacking a quarterback's work ethic hits different. You can debate arm strength. You can debate decision-making. But when you imply a player isn't grinding, isn't locked in, isn't doing the behind-the-scenes work, that sticks. Ryan even escalated it further, saying Shedeur should be embarrassed he's not the starter. Embarrassed. That word carries weight. It implies entitlement. It suggests a lack of humility. And once that narrative forms publicly, it follows a player into locker rooms, fan bases, and front offices. The bigger issue wasn't the opinion itself. It was the certainty behind it. Where did this information come from? Were there coaches confirming he skips meetings, teammates questioning his preparation, reports leaking frustration? None surfaced. No verified sources were presented. No concrete examples were cited. That's what made the reaction so strong. Because when a veteran analyst with league credibility makes a definitive statement about a young quarterback's character, viewers assume it's grounded in insider knowledge, even if it is. And that assumption can quietly shape how an entire fan base views a player before he's even had real reps. There's a difference between saying, "I'm not sold on him as a starter," and saying, "He doesn't prepare." One critiques performance, the other challenges identity. And once identity becomes the storyline, the football conversation changes completely. What made the situation escalate wasn't just the criticism, it was who responded. When Cam Newton addressed the comments, it didn't feel like random support. It felt personal, not emotional, experienced. Cam has lived this before. On the 4th and 1 podcast with Nick Wright, he didn't immediately attack Rex Ryan. Instead, he questioned the foundation of the argument. If you're going to publicly question Shedeur Sanders' work ethic, Where are the receipts? Who confirmed he's not studying? Which coach said he isn't grinding? Because Cam knows how narratives are built. He's been labeled arrogant. He's had his confidence dissected. He's watched personality become the headline instead of performance. So when he heard Shedeur's preparation being questioned without evidence, he recognized the pattern instantly. And then he made a point that shifted the entire conversation. We've never seen in recent memory a third-string, fifth-round pick have this much relevance this deep into the season. That wasn't exaggeration, that was context. Shedeur has spotlight without snaps. He has presence without playing time, and that alone makes people uncomfortable. In most industries, relevance is rewarded. In an NFL quarterback room, if you're not QB1, relevance can feel like pressure. Cam reframed the issue. This isn't about missed throws, it isn't about poor reads, it's about aura. It's about the way Shedeur carries himself even while sitting third string. Calm, confident, unapologetic. And that confidence, some see it as leadership in waiting, others label it arrogance. Cam understands that dynamic because he's been through it. He knows how quickly swagger turns into distraction, depending on who's watching. So his defense wasn't just about protecting a young quarterback. It was about protecting fairness. If you critique performance, that's football. But if you question character without proof, that's something else entirely. And Cam wasn't about to let that slide quietly. This is where the conversation stopped being about football. When Nick Wright brought up the idea that what is one guy's aura is another guy's arrogance, it wasn't a throwaway line. It was a pressure point. Because perception in the NFL isn't neutral, it's filtered. And sometimes, it shifts depending on who's carrying the confidence. When quarterbacks like Tom Brady slammed tablets, barked at teammates, or showed visible frustration, it was labeled passion, competitive fire, leadership, the edge you want from a franchise guy. But when a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders carries himself with visible belief before earning the starting job, the language can change. Suddenly it, tone it down. Suddenly it's be humble. Suddenly it, know your place. Now to be clear, acknowledging a racial or cultural component doesn't mean accusing individuals of racism. It means recognizing that different players can be interpreted differently based on background, style, and expectations. That's a reality many former players have spoken about openly. Even Cam Newton referenced how confidence was often reframed as arrogance during his own career. The same swagger that made him magnetic also made him polarizing. And once that label attaches, it becomes harder to shake than a stat line. That's the tension Shedeur seems to be walking into. If he speaks confidently, critics say he hasn't earned it. If he stays quiet, they question leadership. If he commands attention without snaps, it makes traditional hierarchy uncomfortable. A fifth-round pick isn't supposed to feel like a star before he starts. And maybe that's the deeper discomfort. Because aura isn't something you ask permission for. It's presence. It's gravity. It's the way a player carries himself regardless of depth chart placement. The real question is whether Shedeur is confident. It's why that confidence feels threatening to some and inspiring to others. Strip away the debate shows. Strip away the personality talk. There's a more uncomfortable reality sitting in Cleveland. The offense isn't just struggling, it's near the bottom of the league. With veterans like Joe Flacco already benched in constant rotation under center, the Cleveland Browns haven't found rhythm. Drives stall. Red zone trips fade. The defense keeps games competitive, but the offense hasn't matched that energy. And on that sideline, the most talked about player on the roster. Shedeur Sanders is technically third string, a fifth-round pick, not QB1, not even QB2 at times, yet he's dominating headlines. Fans chant his name when the offense sputters, his jersey moves, his clips trend. That's not normal for a developmental quarterback. That spotlight changes the temperature inside a building. Because now every incomplete pass from the starter triggers the same question. Why not him? Every stalled drive becomes fuel for speculation. Coaches may preach patience, but fans rarely do. And here's the tricky part. If you start him too soon and he struggles, critics say you rushed him. If you wait too long while the offense ranks near the bottom, people question what you're protecting. Either way, the pressure builds. Nick Wright suggested something that makes strategic sense. Teams sometimes hesitate with high-profile backups because attention creates noise, and noise creates division. A quarterback room works best when hierarchy feels clear, but when the backup has star gravity, that clarity gets blurry. Now layer this on top. The Browns' defense is competitive. If the offense were even average instead of near the bottom, they'd likely be in serious playoff conversations. That's not hype, that's math. Which means the longer the offense struggles, the louder the calls become. At some point, results force decisions. And when the most visible player on your roster isn't the one taking snaps, that tension doesn't fade quietly. It grows. Now this is where things get uncomfortable. Because behind the quarterback debate, behind the media noise, there's a rumor that refuses to go away. It's been said in league circles that ownership played a significant role in bringing Shedeur Sanders to the Cleveland Browns. Reports claim the owner was heavily intrigued by his upside, marketability, and long-term star potential. Some insiders have even suggested that ownership put their finger on the scale to make sure the pick happened. Now, to be clear, that's speculation. No official statement confirms internal conflict, but the buzz hasn't disappeared either. And if there's even a fraction of truth to it, the dynamic inside the building becomes very interesting. Because coaches naturally trust the players they scout and prioritize themselves. General managers trust the evaluations they've built their draft boards around. But when ownership strongly backs a player, especially a quarterback, it shifts the power balance. That doesn't mean sabotage. It doesn't mean conspiracy. It means tension. Imagine being a coaching staff that had another quarterback circled as their guy, only to have a high-profile rookie arrive with massive attention and outside backing. Every rep he takes carries more weight. Every mistake becomes magnified. Every success becomes political. Now the room isn't just about development, it's about alignment. And if the staff didn't fully handpick him, patience might look different. Opportunities might be tighter. Leashes might be shorter, not out of malice, but out of human nature. Because when coaches win with their guy, it validates their evaluation. When they win with someone pushed from above, the credit spreads differently. Again, none of this is officially confirmed. But when you see a quarterback with Shedeur's visibility sitting third string while the offense struggles, questions naturally surface. Was he always viewed as a long-term project, or was he drafted with two different visions inside the building? That uncertainty fuels everything. Because if ownership believes in him more than the coaching staff does, the timing of his opportunity becomes more than football. It becomes politics. Here, where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Because talent alone doesn't explain why Shedeur Sanders slid the way he did on draft night. Plenty of quarterbacks with similar tools have gone higher. So what really happened? There's a theory floating around league circles, and it's not about arm strength or mechanics. It's about noise. Leading up to the draft, Shedeur wasn't just another prospect. He came with cameras, headlines, viral clips, and one of the biggest names in football attached to him. Wherever he goes, attention follows. And for some franchises, that's not exciting, it's exhausting. Reports suggested that a few teams were hesitant to bring in that level of spotlight if he wasn't going to be their immediate starter. Because if he's QB2 or QB3, the questions never stop. Every bad series by the starter turns into, when is Shedeur playing? Every press conference becomes about the backup. That's pressure not just on the quarterback room, but on the coaching staff. And not every organization wants that. Nick Wright hinted at this exact dynamic. Teams don't just draft players, they draft situations, they draft media cycles, they draft narratives. And with Shedeur, you're not just drafting a quarterback, you're drafting a storyline. That doesn't mean teams thought he couldn't play. It may mean they didn't want the circus if he wasn't QB1 on day one. But here's the irony. The same attention that may have scared teams off is the exact reason he's dominating headlines now without even starting. He's selling jerseys. He's trending weekly. He's one of the most talked about third-string quarterbacks in recent memory. So did he slide because of ability? Or did he slide because franchises weren't ready to manage the spotlight that comes with him? That's the part nobody says out loud. And if that's true, then the draft wasn't just about football. Here's the part nobody can ignore. For all the loud opinions flying around on national TV, the Cleveland locker room has been quiet. And that silence says more than any debate show ever could. Think about it. If a young quarterback truly wasn't studying, if he really was sitting in the back of meetings disengaged, if coaches felt he was entitled or unprepared, we would have heard about it by now. This is the NFL. Nothing stays hidden for long, especially not inside a struggling organization. But where are the leaks? Where are the anonymous quotes from assistant coaches? Where are the sources inside the building saying he doesn't put in the work? They're not there, and that matters. When narratives are real, they grow legs, they spread. Teammates subtly distance themselves, body language shifts, reporters start hinting. Instead, what we've seen publicly is the opposite. Teammates interact normally. Coaches haven't questioned his preparation. No credible insider has confirmed any of the accusations thrown around on TV. That gap between outside noise and inside silence is important. Because once a label like lazy floats into the air, it sticks. Even if it's never proven, even if it's never backed up, it lingers. And that's exactly why Cam Newton pushed back so hard, not just to defend a player, but to challenge how quickly these character narratives get built without receipts. There's also another layer here that makes this even more uncomfortable. If something truly was wrong internally, why would the organization allow that narrative to spiral publicly without correction? Teams are quick to shut down damaging reports when they're false. The lack of confirmation suggests there isn't much there to confirm. And here's what really stands out. Shedeur hasn't responded emotionally. No public rant, no social media meltdown, no defensive press conference, just steady composure. That kind of restraint doesn't look like someone hiding from work. It looks like someone waiting for opportunity. Sometimes the loudest statement is what's said, it's what is. Right now, all the criticism is happening outside the building. Inside, it's quiet. And in a league where chaos spreads fast, quiet can be very revealing. The question now becomes simple. If there's no proof inside the facility, why is the story being pushed so hard outside of it? And that's where this conversation starts to get even more interesting. Here's the moment everything flips. Right now, it's easy to talk, easy to debate, easy to question work ethic when the player isn't taking meaningful snaps. But the entire tone of this conversation changes the second Shedeur Sanders steps onto the field with real protection, real weapons, and real stakes. Because then there's no hiding behind hypotheticals. The Browns' offense has struggled. That's not opinion, that's production. Drives stall, protection breaks down, the spark hasn't shown up consistently. And when that happens in the NFL, change becomes inevitable. Not emotional change, strategic change. At some point, desperation forces clarity. If Shedeur gets a full week with the ones, if he enters a game plan built around him, if he's protected long enough to actually progress through reads, then the evaluation becomes fair. No more third-string chaos. No more being paired with fringe roster pieces and judged off broken timing. That's when the real test begins. And here's the wild part, the pressure that might rattle most young quarterbacks. That's normal for him. He grew up under cameras, grew up in spotlight environments, played in packed stadiums long before draft night. Criticism isn't new territory, it's familiar ground. That mental wiring matters. Because once he gets extended reps, one of two things will happen. Either he struggles and the critics feel validated, or he flashes, even briefly, and the entire narrative shifts overnight. And if that shift happens, the questions won't be about his confidence anymore. They'll be about why it took so long. That's the risk organizations calculate carefully. Because once a player with this much attention proves he can function under real NFL conditions, the pressure moves from the player to the decision makers. And here's something else to consider. Players remember, they catalog doubt, they store criticism, not emotionally, competitively. That edge becomes fuel. An edge at quarterback can be dangerous in the best way possible. So the real story isn't about what Rex Ryan said. It's about what happens the moment the ball is actually in Shedeur's hands for 4 quarters. Because once tape replaces theory, opinions get tested. And that's when everything changes. If you zoom out, this entire situation was bigger than one TV segment. It wasn't just about something Rex Ryan said. It wasn't just about a third-string quarterback. And it definitely wasn't just about practice seating charts or body language. This was about perception. When Rex Ryan questioned Shedeur Sanders publicly, the debate immediately shifted from football to character, from mechanics to mentality, from performance to personality. And once that line is crossed, it hits differently. Because football criticism is fair game, everyone gets evaluated. But when work ethic gets questioned without visible proof, that sticks in a way interceptions never do. Then you add Cam Newton stepping in, not emotionally, but from experience. He's lived through the aura vs arrogance conversation. He's seen how confidence can be celebrated in one player and criticized in another. That context made this feel less like a hot take and more like a pattern. And that's why the reaction was so strong. Now layer in the Cleveland situation, a struggling offense, a visible backup, rumors about ownership influence, media pressure building weekly. This isn't a simple QB2 story, it's a pressure cooker. But here what matters most. Shedeur hasn't lashed out, he hasn't spiraled publicly, he hasn't fired back on social media, he stayed composed. That restraint tells you something. Because in today's league, silence under fire isn't weakness, it's discipline. At some point, performance will decide this. Either he gets the opportunity and proves he belongs, or he doesn't. The tape will answer what talk shows cannot. But until that moment comes, this debate will keep circling the same core question. Are we evaluating production, or reacting to presence? Because whether critics like it or not, you don't dominate headlines as a third-string quarterback by accident. You don't move jerseys by accident. And you don't spark this level of conversation by accident. This story isn't finished. It's just waiting for snaps.